find their seats. We're about to get started. Okay, everyone, thank you. Welcome to this installment of Capital Clarity. Today, we are doing my favorite topic, medical freedom. First, really quickly though, before we get started, if everyone doesn't mind, I would really like to do a moment of silence and prayer for the family of Mayor Rick Hogeboom from Nampa. If you have not heard, he passed away last evening. So please, if you could just, let's do a moment of silence and prayer for him and his family. Okay, thank you for that. I'm sorry to be starting today on such a sad note with that news. So, today's topic, medical freedom. As many of you know, last year I worked on the Medical Freedom Act. It was a great first step, with Idaho leading the nation in declaring that after the COVID debacle, never again would we allow medical interventions to be forced on the people as a prerequisite for participating in society. If we do not own our bodies and do not freely give consent based on all factors, we are slaves. Representative Beiswenger, who's here with us today, was the House sponsor on the Medical Freedom Act and did a great job. We worked on that bill for two reasons: to prevent what happened during COVID from ever happening in Idaho again, and because adults had no exemptions written into law to protect their jobs, their businesses, access to society, and their livelihood. The bill laid the groundwork for this year's Medical Freedom Act expansion bill. Although we do in fact have exemptions in law for childhood vaccine mandates, it is the big one in my mind. This is the culmination of the work I have done for the last 15 years. It's the bill I dreamed of, and honestly, I never thought I would actually see it printed in my lifetime. This year's bill is the removal of the last of the vaccine mandates, those required for school entry and daycare enrollment. Idaho has some of the strongest legal childhood exemption language in the country. The problem is that our exemptions are not strong enough. The problem is not that our exemptions are not strong enough. The problem is the omission of this information, the outright lying to parents, the coercion and the scare tactics used by the schools and the daycares and the health districts in our state. I have seen the letters that go home to parents from school districts in every corner of Idaho, which say, your child will be unenrolled and not allowed to attend school as of October 10th because we do not have up-to-date records showing that they have every recommended dose of every vaccine. They make no mention of the exemptions, which is actually a bill I worked on a couple years ago, that they are required by Idaho law to tell parents, you have a right to an exemption. They are not doing it. This is one of the most heartbreaking examples of a government action being destructive to the rights of the people. We have a responsibility to alter what is destructive to the people and to the future of this state and country. This year, we celebrate the 250th anniversary of our Declaration of Independence. This is a moment where the government is being destructive to the rights of the people, and we have a responsibility to alter it. There used to be week-long rashes like measles and chickenpox that were a childhood rite of passage. We've traded those short-term infections for lifelong chronic disease with these vaccines, and that is the simple truth. Cancers, autoimmune disorders, infertility, allergies, asthma, eczema, food allergies, MS, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, the list goes on and on and on. After 50 years in Idaho law, the mandates that never should have been there to begin with must be repealed. This is what this year's bill will do if we can get it passed. America's children are sicker than they have ever been, and we have a responsibility to put a stop to this madness. So with that, I would like to introduce my good friend and colleague, the brilliant and brave Dr. Ryan Cole.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for coming out this afternoon. Well, here we are. 6 years later, it was 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And, we've given out the award to Gavin Newsom now 5 years in a row for being the Realtor of the Year for Idaho. Things have changed a lot, and a journey of hundreds of thousands of miles for me started at this podium. And it's interesting to reflect on it. Why did I speak out when I spoke out? Well, because the truth is the truth, no matter what. And in the noble profession of medicine, we have a job, not to a system, not to an administrator, not to some big insurance company. We have an oath to a patient. And that oath is to first do no harm. Primum non nocere. And unfortunately, now we have medicine practiced by big corporations. We have medicine controlling what you should think, and here's the only options for you. When for, I don't know, thousands upon thousands of years of human existence, the amazing human body has been amazingly resilient. And yet we think now that we're going to give our body to a system because they know better than we do. I'm not saying modern medicine hasn't come up with a lot of very good things. But if you look at the history of vaccination, most childhood infectious diseases were essentially gone, not all the way gone, but down at a buzz level before vaccines ever rolled out. The best doctor we ever had was the plumber. And why do I say that? Well, because of hygiene. And then the second best doctor we ever had was the person who helped invent the refrigeration systems. So we give all this credit to the history of science and modern medicine and all these wonders of technology, but really nutrition, clean food, and public sewer systems and clean water are why most of us have survived to this ripe old age in which some of us find ourselves. So, this whole thought of medical freedom, it's really curious that we have to fight for it. In a free nation, greatest nation on earth, and I've traveled to many of them, and I've been privileged to speak in the European Parliament, other parliaments, the UK Parliament, Croatia, Romania, Italy, etc. I've spoken to leaders all around the world. There are few of those leaders, like Representative Beiswenger, I can never pronounce your last name. Anyway, who have stood up for the right thing. And why? Because he cares. And the corporate interests are strong. We all know that. So we're up against a big system, and unfortunately, we're living in a corporatocracy, and the whole construct of a public-private partnership really historically is fascism. So we need to, what is the price of liberty? Eternal vigilance. And so all of us are here because we've been vigilant. Now, 6 years ago, does anybody remember the first death? Because I sure do. Yep, the death was curiosity. Curiosity died. And everybody decided in lockstep to just go along with the narrative. And was that planned? Was it a psychological operation? You bet it was. But people in this room resisted. And it's no different than patterns of history. Why are we a great nation today? It wasn't because everybody stood up against the king in England and said, you know, we're cutting ties, we're done. It was 3%, a rabble-rousing 3%. And these were wealthy landowners, our founding fathers, attorneys, educators, landowners. And they pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. They risked everything for freedom so that people could be themselves, have the opportunity to not be subjects to a king, to a government, to an administrator, to a system, to a hospital, to a doctor, whatever it may be. And that's all it takes to start a revolution. Now, as I've traveled the country, traveled the world, sat in so many legislatures around the country, been on, I can't even count the number of interviews and podcasts and things I've done. The people want freedom. We just need to instill that in our legislators to go back to founding principles. That it is we, the people. It is not we, the government. They work for us. We don't work for them. We even pay their paycheck. We even pay their paycheck. So are we willing to be curious again, to ask the questions again? And are we willing to be wrong? Look, you know, people look at one wing of politics as crazy and another wing of politics as crazy. That's fine. But we've lost the art of dialogue. I like the quote by the Stoic Marcus Aurelius, kind of modified from Aristotle. The sign of an educated mind is to be able to hold two opposing thoughts, yet ascribe to neither. So are we willing to engage in dialogue? Are we willing to entertain the difficult thought, the difficult idea that may challenge our own presumptions, to find a solution to live more freely as a people? And are we willing to stand up when things are wrong? And I think that's really the crux of the question of who controls you, who controls your body, who controls your thought. And as a pathologist, what do? I observe. There are patterns. So I see patterns of cells. I see patterns of inflammatory and infectious conditions, or I see patterns of cancers. But there are also societal patterns. But if we're blind, we can't see patterns. We need to open our eyes and uncomfortably look at what others are thinking, because that's how we can get to the table and have dialogue. And what I've found over the years, you're never going to beat anybody over the head with data and have them walk away convinced. That doesn't work. But you can always plant the seed of a question. People ask me, well, how do you convince someone else that they're wrong on all these vaccine issues or wrong on all these medical issues? And my answer is I don't convince anybody. But what I do is I ask questions. And my favorite question is, are you sure? And I find very often they'll say, beat their chest like Tarzan and say, of course I'm sure. But they'll go home and they'll look. And that's all we can do, is keep asking the questions. Keep asking the questions that hopefully inspire others to the very least look. And as many have heard me say in many a presentation, you can't find what you don't look for. You can't find what you don't look for. And so in this vaccine debate, or in this who controls your health debate, the powers that be have vested financial interests, obviously. But they don't want to look, because there might be some answers there that they don't want to hear. Like, how many childhood vaccines have been tested against placebo over time? Well, technically none. How many have these been looked at, given in conjunction with each other? How many long-term studies are there on that? Well, the answer is 0. Even the Institute of Medicine, which is a whole long story, they confessed back in 2013, yeah, no studies have looked at combining vaccines. We don't know. And childhood diseases, as Sarah mentioned, that were just very common. Most children survived, especially in our era. What about the fact that getting measles protects you from cancer and heart disease down the road later in life? Well, the system that's going to make billions of dollars off giving that shot doesn't want you to know that. But the fact of the matter is the human body is amazing and resilient. And if it's well nourished and taken care of, most diseases come and go. Are there those rare individuals we need to help and protect? Of course, common sense. But we are living in an era of a great poisoning. And Dr. Ladapo was here several weeks ago, a great friend, wonderful leader, great thinker, willing to ask the questions. And in Florida, they did some studies that showed, for example, glyphosate, trace glyphosate in breads, trace heavy metals in children's candy at concerning levels. Aluminum, a neurotoxicant, damaging to the brain. And yet we give unknown quantities in great amounts of vaccines to children. And it crosses the blood-brain barrier. And then we wonder why we have neurologic conditions in this younger generation. Going back to glyphosate, I just spoke at a large national pediatric conference. And big money is trying to get the same liability protection for herbicides and pesticides that the vaccines have. They want no liability. Now, here's a question that most people don't know. Okay, it's an herbicide, right? Well, early 2000s as well as 2010, Monsanto, before being bought by Bayer, patented glyphosate as a broad spectrum antibiotic. The allowable dose by the EPA is equal to the scientifically studied effective dose as an antibiotic. So we wonder why we as a society are having so many gut problems, allergy problems, neurologic problems. It binds metals in the soil. It kills the soil. It kills a healthy, diverse, rich soil and allows nasty funguses to overgrow. It persists in the soil for, in one study, up to 12 years in the roots of trees. So it's an antibiotic given to almost every American in their food supply almost every day without one of the pillars of medicine, informed consent. So when you're eating that piece of bread, did you give informed consent to take an antibiotic that day? So, I mean, just a fascinating question. And never mind, again, all the heavy metals, the dyes, the skin chemicals, the sick buildings, etc. And yet we have an era in which judges fancy themselves doctors. So if you haven't been living under a rock, a judge in Massachusetts just the other day, Judge Murphy, decided that he would reverse all of what Kennedy has done and the advisory committee on immunization practices, fire all of those people appointed, saying they're not qualified. And so we have judges legislating from the bench, being activists, taking away your voice all across a nation and the opportunity that you have to protect your children, all in the name of money and big interests. So we're up against it. And then, of course, what he did was because he's indemnified, he slandered, libeled all those exceedingly qualified and talented physicians and scientists on that committee. So we're in this era of name and blame. The media will instantly label you and then go back and use that as the reference to discredit you and discredit your thought. So we are in this game back and forth. And if I'm wrong, Tell me how I'm wrong, and I will always sit down and have the conversation so I can learn. And I think that's what we as a people need to be willing to do, and say, what if I'm wrong? And we need to invite people to the table. And we see all the vitriol online and the back and forth that's not good for our mental health. But at the same time, we probably agree on about 80% of things. And if people understood the history of vaccines, they would probably say, it was perhaps a good idea back then, but the poisons, the contaminations, the long-term studies showing perhaps the lack of efficacy, again, that's a data conversation, but you could still sit down and say, are we talking feelings? Are we talking facts? And most people don't want the facts. They would rather argue from the place of feeling. And don't get me wrong, some good poetry is good poetry, but feelings don't belong in the scientific conversation. And feelings certainly don't belong. There's a difference between science and ideology. And if you look at science and the broad history of science and all the millions of papers that are out there, my friend Dr. Bhattacharya has brought up the reproducibility crisis. Did you know that 86% of scientific studies have never been reproduced? And so all these magnificent claims of what modern medicine and science can do may be a little bit out there. And it is time to question assumptions. People ask, are we winning? I'm like, well, is it winning or is it protecting? I'm not in it to win. I'm in it to value life and protect life. And this is the difference between certain political factions, is one values life and another doesn't. And if we look at life as something beautiful and valuable, then we get involved in protecting it. And I think this is what we're up against, is something called utilitarian bioethics, the greatest good for the greatest number, which takes away the value of the individual and the individual freedom and the individual right of not just life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, but everything else. And it makes you a commodity in a system. Notice I said the pursuit of happiness. It doesn't say guaranteed happiness, but you're allowed to pursue happiness. And part of that happiness is knowing that your body is your own, and your ability to decide what does or doesn't go into it is your own. And we need to protect that. And again, very grateful to our House and Senate members here in the amazing state of Idaho who have stood up. And as I travel, people say, oh, you're lucky you live in Idaho. I'm happy to report what we have accomplished here in Idaho has lit a spark in many other states. And medical freedom bills are coming forward. Now, a couple have been squashed already because of what? Vested interests, big money, fine. But we'll bring it again and again. I was in DC. I've been in DC quite a bit. I just got back from DC. Recently, in a meeting with the staff of the Speaker of the House, they said, look, we want to do a lot of these things in terms of medical freedom. The winds of politics won't allow them to at the moment, but they said, keep doing what you're doing at the state level because it gives us courage to do what's right. So as we, Idaho, are the first domino, many dominoes are yet to fall, and there will be medical freedom in many, many states. And then eventually the people will be given that prime directive of our founding fathers to allow the individual to stand in primacy over corporations and government. We're fighting for that. We're fighting for what we were established as a nation. So, science is in a tenuous position right now. A lot of people distrust much of what's out there, and they should. And they should question, and they should always assume that there's an interest behind it until proven otherwise, whether it's vaccines, whether it's certain medications. And you look at the history of medicine. Are we using mercury anymore as an antibiotic? Of course not. Are we doing frontal lobotomies anymore? No. Did we screw up in the opioid crisis as a profession? Absolutely. There's syphilis. Yeah, which one? Oh, cigarettes. Oh, yeah. 4 out of 5 doctors recommend Camels, blah, blah, blah. But think of all the things that modern medicine has gotten wrong and say to yourself, wait a minute. These are just people trying to, do something, but they're human too. And they often get it wrong. And if they don't reproduce their evidence, then you've got to say to yourself, what else have they gotten wrong? And so we're going to look back 10, 20, 30 years from now and laugh at ourselves and go, wow, that was really Cro-Magnon what we were trying to do with the human body. So I think we have the opportunity to continue to wake up our neighbors, to wake up neighboring states, our friends, our families. And again, not beat them with our ideology or somebody else's ideology, but health really begins with valuing freedom. Health begins with us saying, hey, I want to be healthy. And one of the greatest things we can do is to be healthy and be an example to others. And choose to not be part of a system that wants to control us. So I would say, let's keep fighting for what we're doing. Let's allow nuance back into conversation. Let's quit with the name calling. Name calling, it's laughable, ad hominem. No, let's go ad rem. Let's talk about the issue. And let's put the issue on the table. I like to joke, you should never bring an umbrella to a brainstorm. Let all the ideas fall down. Let them all be there, but then sift them out and share the facts and share what we can do together. Together, we really are an eclectic mix of a common people that want good for a nation. And we are still the best nation on earth. I might brag a little bit. We are still the best state in the nation. So there is that too. That's because Idahoans are amazing people. Anybody listening outside the state, sorry, we're full. So let's, except for the really good ones. If you're a freedom fighter and love freedom, then yeah, Idaho has a few spots left, but we might be taking applications. Are we going to live in comfort and safety and complacency? Or are we going to step forward and be the type of people that fights for the next generation? As I was walking in with my lovely wife, took a pit stop in the restroom, and there's this whole gaggle of children here at the Capitol today. And it reminded me of why these amazing House and Senate members here in our state are doing what they do. It's not about us. It's about making this the most free, livable place for generations to come so that they can achieve their goals in life freely, unencumbered, unharmed. We all can do something. Not everybody's called to do everything. Everybody's called to do something. So whatever it is, whatever your skill set is, be the type of person that cares about your neighbor, your friend, your family, your community. All the arguments, all the vitriol don't need to be there, but we have the opportunity to continue to make health a priority. If you're healthy, you are more free, period. If you are healthy, you are more free. And then you can stay engaged in this fight for freedom. I could ramble. I already have. But I want to finish with my favorite quote. Many of you have heard it before, many of you haven't. And it's by Thomas Jefferson. And it's very simple. I prefer dangerous freedom over peaceful slavery. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Cole. So now, next up, we have Representative Rob Beiswenger here. He has been the sponsor of the Medical Freedom Act both last year and this year, and he's going to give us an update on the bill. Thank you.
It's like on the edge of this thing here. So State Representative Rob Beiswenger, District 8, represent 4 counties, Boise, Valley, Custer, and Elmore counties. Is my first term, second year of it. And the health freedom issue is why I got involved. I don't know how much time do I have? I could ramble too. 15? Oh, okay. So I'll give you a little bit longer version here. So, I grew up in Pennsylvania, and then I got down to DC. I was on an internship down there. I was about 23 years old. And well, even before that, but anyway, I remember people getting the flu shot down there, and I was young and healthy out of college, and people were like, well, Robert, are you getting the flu shot? And I'm like, do I need to? And I just kind of didn't really have any science behind it, didn't have much thought. I just kind of like, I'm not gonna start injecting myself with this stuff. It seems like that's something for someone who'd be sicker, who needed some extra help to take this medication to let them not be sick. I'll just fight it off and live with it. I guess I don't recall getting it, but everyone in this building I was working at, we're all like, just thought I was crazy for not doing them. They had a truck come on site and do it. I'm just like, okay, I just kind of went on with my life and didn't think much of it. And now my mom, when I was in college, was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. This was also about 20 years ago. And at least at the time, I don't know where it is now, but you could only diagnose ovarian cancer at your final stages of it, your last stage. And so you were not in good shape. So my dad, in a scurry, tried to find alternative providers, knowing that if you do chemo radiation, it basically wasn't going to work out for you. Scoured the country trying to find alternative medicine providers. And this is kind of before the internet really had kind of taken hold. You couldn't find a lot of stuff. But what he did find was across the country, places that were shut down by the FDA, the FTC. They were strangled in some way by the government, saying, oh, that's not approved by the FDA. You can't have this treatment. Long story short, my dad actually took her to Mexico across the border to find a bunch of American doctors who had migrated across the border to have alternative medicine treatments. And there were pictures of other Americans who had gone down there to the same hospital. And there were very notable people down there, former elected officials and other kind of people you'd probably recognize down there. I don't have the name on me, so be careful what I say, but and eventually it didn't end up working out for my mom. She lasted about 2 years and passed away. But the frustration of, my dad was like an Air Force pilot, cargo plane, but still saying, here I am, serving my country, and yet I can't even elect to get the own medical treatment I want for my wife. And so those kind of things kind of got me started on it, sort of the health freedom kind of journey. I wrote a paper in college talking about how the FDA and the corporate capture is what Kennedy calls it, right? So how the companies are basically, they own the FDA, so the FDA does what the companies want, and therefore they squash their competition. So that's how I kind of got into this stuff. And I got married in 2007. And my wife is a very special gifted person working with children, especially children with special needs. And she was working with kids with autism. And so we started getting into that conversation. And some of the parents would tell her, and some of these parents who were an emergency room doctor, a police officer, a pediatrician, going, yeah, my kid was fine until, and then the next day they weren't. But then to find out, these families couldn't talk about it. This medical professional said, if I go public with what happened here, if I let it out, I will lose my license and my job is gone. And it drove me crazy to think about stuff like that could happen. Like, here's a medical professional, licensed, trained. He's practicing every day, just like anybody else you would see at St. Luke's or wherever else, right? And he can't even talk about it. Then you get to the families who would try to talk to their relatives about what happened. And they would get pushed back too. If you keep talking like this, you're not coming over for Christmas. So these parents, the parents were working with their daughter, paying my wife to work with them, right? So these are like our people we kind of got close to, because we spent several years working with these kids in their homes, with their families, learning about them and hearing their stories. And we didn't back and forth a whole lot on it. We just kind of listened and that stuff. So then we got the autism thing, going. And just over time, just to watch the squashing of even the discussion on the issue, we can't even talk about it. Even to talk about this is dangerous, Rob. I think it was a Hollywood actor came out one time. He was on like the Today Show, and he kind of casually mentioned that, I think it was Robert De Niro, and he gets on there and goes, yeah, I guess, my kid seemed to struggle after he got his shots. I mean, within hours, and certainly within the next 24 hours, every media outlet out there was calling him a quack, dangerous, all the above. I mean, TV, radio, newspaper. It was a full press corps automatically. It was like they were just waiting for somebody to say this. And they came out the next day and just crushed him, right? So all this stuff goes on, right? And this is kind of like my life leading up to all these conversations and frustrations. And I learned about vaccines and the pros and cons and, the plumbing issue, like, well, these things really were on the decline before vaccines really came around, especially their lethality. And then we got here and COVID started. And into it, because my dad's on the same page with the stuff. I was talking, I said, look, as bad as this COVID is, this is the moment we've been waiting for. People will finally start to question what's going on here, because what they're doing with COVID is the same mindset they're doing with all this stuff, right? You can't question it. You have to take it, shut up and get in line and take your medicine, right? I said, eventually we will turn the pages here. So yeah, 6 years ago, we started the COVID. And then actually, I think today, 1 year ago, Idaho passed the Medical Freedom Act and sent it to the governor's desk on our first try. And so we got that. So there finally was a counterattack, but it took a little time for that to happen. And it's frustrating. I mean, I share the frustration here with you on that, because we ended up passing that bill 3 times. And what you saw them try to negotiate, we passed the first time, the governor vetoed it, right? And what they tried to come back with and get on the Senate side was to make sure the daycare's language was tightened up in favor of vaccine mandates. They're like, well, you can have all this, Rob. You can have the business, and you can have this, and you can have this, and this, and it's all yours, Rob, except for these daycares. We're going to keep that. So you kind of saw, okay, that's where the fight really is, right? That's what they're willing to fight for. That's the hill they're going to die on. And so we had to fight it. Not just, public relations wise, like our own, the governor right here. And we risked, but by fighting over that, we risked destroying the whole bill. We could have lost it all and not had any Medical Freedom Act. Unfortunately, there's enough people who are fed up with COVID, with the whole thing. There's legislators in here with vaccine injured children. Top to bottom, there are legislators who were nearly died during the COVID thing because an overreaction with hospitals. There was a legislator who was in the hospital, and they were just going to let him die in the hospital because he had COVID. Like, we don't want to touch you. We're out of here. You keep picking up these stories. Eventually, how do you think we got 2/3 of the vote in the House and Senate? It's because the medical industry kind of inflicted upon themselves. Everybody's now questioning, hey, we've gone too far. We can't have it like this anymore. So eventually, on the third try, on literally the last day of session, we pulled off that garbage out of the Senate bill, threw it back up, and put it back on their desk. The governor signed it because the public outrage was so strong. It was just enormous. I don't think it's hard to even think about how intense it was. The calls, the emails, just the tension in the building, all on that one issue. We're not giving up on this. So we got that done. We claimed victory. But, Sarah and I, even last year, we'd identified those little bit of shortcomings and some areas that were left over from that bill, and which is the school language, the daycare language, essentially, right? And the way the law is right now, it says that you are required, literally says you are required to take a vaccine to go to school or daycare, right? But then they're nice enough to grant us the exceptions of philosophical, medical, or religious. But like Sarah said, they're not always telling people that. Even though Sarah also got a few years ago a bill passed saying you are required to tell them this section. Now, some of them will just legalese put it in there. They'll say, they'll reference this code that you need to go look up and figure out for yourself, that you don't really have to take a vaccine to get into school there. But some of these people, they just can't give up their control. They can't give up whatever, right? Their power. And so they keep telling people they have to do it in defiance of really state law and really defiance of the intention of it. So, the simple part of this bill really is to take those 2 provisions and just wipe them out and just say, here, we're just going to say it's voluntary, which one of the complaints of the bill, they say, why introduce the bill? It said, well, it's already voluntary. I was like, well, okay, if you think that, you would have no problem with me writing in here that it actually is voluntary. It's just simple logic to me. And my, the German last name there, my brain just pretty sure we can just call it voluntary if you're okay with that. But still, well, I don't know if we could do that. It's can be safe enough. Can we do this and that? And, we passed the Medical Freedom Bill a year ago, and we're all still here, just throwing that out there. There's been no lice outbreaks. We've had no, measles is still, it's pretty far gone down there, and all that stuff. So we are working the bill. We had a hearing on the bill, and we actually covered about 6 different areas in it. It went down, and it was a tie vote, 8-8. So we were scrambling to work with to find an extra vote here and there. We do think we have a path forward to get it done, actually, but we've pulled some of the sections out just because I think it just got confusing. Someone asked about one line on page 5 or one word here and there, and that's kind of it's the trick of having a larger, more broader bill. Is someone could pick up one thing on one page. It's not even something your biggest thing, and all of a sudden now someone might pull their vote against it or use that as an excuse to vote against it. All those kinds of things we're wrestling with. So I know the speakers have been supportive of it. I think we can wrestle the votes here. Not much time left. I guess that's kind of the trouble right now. Is that the clock is definitely against us right now. But I do think over time, we will continue to see medical freedom pushing across the country here. You saw what we did here. I mean, Kansas just introduced a medical freedom bill with a $50,000 fine for violating the law, which even for me, I was like, wow, that's really aggressive there. So, and before, I mean, all the bills that were like, health freedom kind of bills around this stuff, nothing even touched what the medical freedom bill was doing. Nothing even in comparison, it really was out there being fought for. And you've seen it introduced in Arizona, I think maybe Indiana, you probably correct me some of the states, but Kansas, Utah had one. So it's out there, it's running. People are picking something from last year. And what happens is there's conferences and meetings that people have, and someone's going to say, hey, I saw Idaho did this. And like, they're going to look at the language, and we do it too from other states. Like, Texas has got this bill. I'm going to start running that, right? And so it's going to make its way around. It's going to become popular. People who vote against it are going to lose their elections, and it will keep happening over and over again. So it is a process. It's going to take time. Idaho is just a little more independent minded out here. So I think we've got it through ahead of it. I was glad to be part of it, and I'll stop my ramble and from there.
Okay. Thank you for that update. So we can now take about 10 minutes of questions. But just so you know, we do have to be out of this room right at 1 o'clock. So when we are done here, please take conversations out into the hallway. Dr. Cole, do you want to come back up?
I'm an MD, retired, 25 years, always board certified family medicine, always in good standing, but I was always an employed physician. I stayed away from the vaccines. The nurses did the vaccines. I heard nurses say over and over again, you want your flu shot? Sign right here. No informed consent. With mandates, it's an oxymoron to have informed consent, because that second word, consent, you don't have the freedom of consent if you have mandates. So aren't all vaccines given illegally with no informed consent?
Well, I would, in many technical aspects of your question, agree with you. And in order to have consent, you need to know what's going into you. And yeah, you're consenting, you consent to a mandate. That is oxymoronic, isn't it? And then think about mandating something that doesn't work. In retrospect, the COVID shots, did they work? Yeah, sure, they worked at making you sicker and catching COVID more often. Or last year's flu shot. Last year's formulation, big Cleveland Clinic study showed that it increased your chance of getting the flu by 26, 27%. So modern medicine certainly doesn't have all the answers. And to say that you are mandated a product that we don't know what the outcomes are going to be, and you don't get to know what's in it, yeah, it's a pretty good question, and why Representative Beiswenger and others are fighting for your individual right to say whether or not, look, if you want all the shots in the world, good for you. Good for you. However, there's many of us that don't, and we'll never get another one again because we've seen the game. So it should be freedom of choice.
Pill counters give the vaccines. That's a huge change. Why?
And who are the mandatory reporters of injury? The clinics are supposed to report all injury by federal law. And so sneaking them into the pharmacies and giving the pharmacists all the opportunity to give all the shots in the world, but not having any follow-up, that's a bad idea, because then you can hide all the harms.
Dr. Cole, Ron Nate, Idaho Freedom Foundation, thank you for speaking at our event again. I am intrigued by your comments about aluminum and metals in candy, in the vaccines. Is there a benign reason why it's there? Do they put it there, or do they not bother to take it out? Why does the metal end up in those places?
Well, in the vaccines, thank you, Ron, and thank you to the Idaho Freedom Foundation for sponsoring Capital Clarity and the opportunity to speak here. And, aluminum, in order, if I gave you a protein from a pathogen and just injected it into your body, would quickly just get rid of it. It wouldn't react, and you wouldn't build up a big immune response. So they put the aluminum in there. It's called an adjuvant. It's an irritant to wake up your immune system to go, whoa, 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 we're on fire here. And then the construct behind that is then it will also react to that protein from the pathogen in the vaccine. So that's why the aluminum is there. However, what medicine hasn't considered is when you give that, now your whole system is hyperreacting, and you potentially can react to any other proteins in that window of time that you inhale and or ingest. Why all of a sudden do we have tons of peanut allergies? Why do we have all sorts of interesting allergies in children we never had before? Because the moment you expose the body to that aluminum, it's on fire for several days and reacting to a lot of different proteins, the ones it shouldn't react to as well. Now, as far as the candy goes, that the arsenic in the candy and heavy metals and cadmium and lead and other things, you have to ask agriculture why they're spraying all of our food with poisons. And arsenic is a common heavy metal in pesticides. And then glyphosate will bind literally some of these heavy metals out of the soil, and it goes into the tissue of plants. It's a chelator. That means claw. It grabs onto these metals. Now it becomes part of the tissue of the plant. Now, unfortunately, to the detriment of the health of our food, it also sucks out a lot of the healthy minerals we do need. So now it concentrates in like high fructose corn syrup. 92 to 95% of American corn is sprayed with glyphosate, deficient in minerals and concentrated in heavy metals. And then they make a concentrated sugar out of that that's going to have concentrated heavy metals in it. And then the kids are eating the candy with heavy metals. Not good for the brain. So long medical lecture, but that's kind of the gist of it. And then my question is why my colleagues aren't asking these questions.
Dr. Cole, thank you. Thank you, Representative Beiswenger. I appreciate it very much, the fight. But I just wanted to ask, do you think we can get back to our founding principles like you were talking about without first holding those accountable for the damage that's been done, like the hospitals with remdesivir, Monsanto spraying a carcinogen on our food? Or can we do it in tandem?
I'm hopeful that we can. I think everybody is clamoring for accountability. If you haven't looked at it yet, go to covidjustice.org. It's a national state we're trying to get the U.S. Senate to put forward as a proposition to ask for that accountability. And it's a great document. Brownstone.org put that forward. It's one step. I think we all want accountability. Are we going to see it in our lifetimes? I don't know. I can only hope. I know I will continue to fight for medical freedom. Are the consequences, as Representative Beiswenger said, are the consequences harsh? Sure. You know, did I lose a career over it? Sure. Would I do it over again? Sure, I would. Because freedom matters more than anything. And lives, fortune, sacred honor. If we value freedom, then we need to keep fighting for freedom and not be complacent. So the legal system has been utilized and gamed against many people, but at the same time, we can't stop fighting. Any comments?
Well, good to see you again, Dr. Cole, and nice to meet you, Representative Beiswenger. So I think my question is kind of for both of you, like, how do we keep the global influence? I mean, we've got chemtrails spraying stuff. We got Gates and DFID vaccinating all the animals in the world. Like, it seems like everywhere we turn, Idaho is this little sacred place, but it comes in from everywhere. There's so much money globally. Like, how do we how do we put a barrier around what's here? And then even people in our own legislature on the other side are still voting for things that are just plainly weird. So if you can speak to that a little bit, thank you.
I guess comedically we could build a wall, and try that. Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I mean, it's, we only turned the tide on this issue, I'd say, a few years ago, and it's kind of building up since then, right? But so really just kind of the infancy stages of kind of the counterattack, I think, so to speak. So it's going to take a while. I mean, but look, I mean, you got Kennedy up there running HHS in DC, unthinkable a few years ago. I mean, even a couple years ago, the guy who's like the anti-vaccine quack, according to their side, is now in charge of all of that stuff, or the head of it. And he's got Dr. Oz in there, who, and you got Makari at the FDA. I mean, we've had a total overturn at the federal level. But yeah, there's like money around the world baked into this. I always remind people when we have these votes, some of these votes, and we lose votes and, on different things. I'm like, these are we're ultimately in is an eternal fight, right? We have these individual battles where you're hitting on and we're losing this, winning that and stuff, but we can expand medical freedom tomorrow and something else will be up. I mean, here I've got medical freedom bill also fighting this mosquito districts and stuff and spraying people against their will. I mean, and yet people are like, well, I don't know, maybe that's an okay idea, but it takes time to be like, well, here's the problems with that. Here's what they should be doing. Here are some options here. Here's things they're not doing because of the government program. So it's just, you just kind of keep carrying on. And I think these ideas are getting more popular. There is electoral advantage, political advantage to supporting these things. I think that's a lot of people in here needed. You get someone crazy like me who's like, I don't care if I don't win next year, I'm going to do this bill. That's just the way it's going to be. And so Sarah finds me and like, but for a lot of other people here, they're here for other issues, right? And so when the issue turned popular, they jumped on it. Right. So, I mean, there's other people here for, child's custody issues. Some people are here to do agricultural issues. Everyone comes here with their things they want to do and make sure they're protecting. So you got to get that political cover, get people emailing and calling and knowing, hey, we expect you to be voting for this kind of stuff. And I think you're seeing that already. But yeah, I mean, you've probably got more influence on that stuff.
Well, and it starts with courage, like he has, and doing the right thing, the right way for the right reason. And yes, the corporations, the gates, the great poisoning, as I call it, look, they've got a lot of money. But what you still have in America is your voice. And during COVID, he spent $380 million paying the media so he could keep his good image. Most people don't hear about that, how many tens of millions he gave. But the legacy media, 75% of their funding comes from where? Pharma. So, if you're a conspiracy theorist, you're just 6 months ahead of the curve, basically. And so you just need to keep using your voice. And again, having the rational, reasonable conversations, not beating anybody over the head, but just saying, hey, I have a question. What do you think about this? And they may say, oh, that's crazy. And then you ask again, and they may say, oh, it's still crazy. But they may start thinking about it. And once they start thinking about it, to Representative Beiswenger's point, all of a sudden it is in the zeitgeist and people are talking about it. But if you stay silent, silence is compliance. It means you agree with how the game's being played and you just sit on the sideline. But if you want to win the game, you got to be in the game. So don't be silent.
One thing I just like to remind people, not to brag, but I do have the same medical degree as Bill Gates does. So
And then I would just add to that, it's really important that the people be involved. Like, to follow up on what Dr. Cole just said, for me, I had my own personal experience with the vaccine exemptions and my own child was affected. And so I educated myself. I learned Idaho law. I got involved. I started talking to as many people as I could. I made myself an expert on it. And then I started working on legislation. And that was more than 10 years ago. And so I think the answer to your question is, I mean, we know eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. Every person in this room has a responsibility. Every American has a responsibility to be in this fight. So find your issue and start working on it, and you'll find that it grows. I mean, now I'm working on raw milk and smart meters and chemtrails and geoengineering. I mean, when you get in the medical freedom realm, there's so many things, but on any topic, make yourself the expert and start educating everyone around you. And that's how you make the difference and keep Idaho strong and keep Idaho safe and free. Anybody else? Okay. Yeah.
When you talk about peanut allergies, I ate peanut butter. I can remember 50 years ago when there was a problem in Africa with the starving kids, probably Ethiopia. The stuff that they gave the mothers to feed those babies was peanuts. Do you remember? It was called Puffy. Do you remember that? Those kids had no problems with it, and yeah, I don't believe in vaccines. I'm not sure I believe in doctors.
Yeah. The amazingness of the human body is always understated. And to think that we can chronically intervene and make it better than it's already designed to be is basically the height of hubris. So I think maintaining a humility in everything we do in life is critical, and the humility to be able to say, what if we're wrong? Well, then let's change course and let's do what this great state has done. And let's give people their bodies back, their choices back. Let's give back freedom, because that's what we fought for. And that's why 250 years later, we're still here. So let's protect the sacredness of what's sacred. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, as long as you're not spraying the apple. Yeah, that's right.
Thank you all for coming.
It's right there behind you.